All right, Happy New Year, everybody. It is January the 1st when I'm recording this here today, and we've got about a week and a half before the Screen Actors Guild Award nominations are announced. So that's on January the 11th this year. And kind of funny, I was looking up the calendar here for SAG, and request line opens for final vote paper ballots in lieu of online voting. That begins tomorrow, actually, so kind of fitting. Anyway, so I wanted to give a quick update on Screen Actors Guild Award nomination predictions. One thing I kind of totally have skipped over so far when we've been talking SAG this year is stunt ensemble. So I wanted to make sure we cover that. Talk about the films that I think are probably in contention to get that, and I'm up to like 9 films, I think, that I think have a shot. Some of them are a little more long shots than others, but you know, you kind of have to remember with that stunt ensemble category, films like The Irishman and Joker make it in. Films like Ballad of Buster Scruggs can make it in for stunt ensemble. So sometimes you got to think a little bit outside the box with those. Anyhow, but yeah, really quick though, as we go into the predictions here, I was going to say one quick thing. I did a little bit of research here since last time, and I talked about how, going back to the Globes for a second, Banshees was, with 8 nominations. I was like, that's probably one of the most nominated films in a long time. I looked back a little bit, and I haven't gone through every last year, but I was like thinking of other films that have done really well at the Globes and stuff. And Chicago landed 8 nominations as well. So it's in that company, Banshees is. So the reason I bring that up is because I looked up to the record for Screen Actors Guild for like most nominations and stuff, because we've got a couple of films this year that really stand a shot at tying or surpassing the record. So the record, 3 films have received 5 nominations from SAG. The first one is Shakespeare in Love, which got it's the only film so far in SAG history to get all 4 acting categories and an ensemble nomination. Then you had Chicago, funny enough, which got 5 nominations. And then the last one was Doubt, actually, which got 5 nominations. So, I looked at it this year. I'm like, there's a couple of films, I think, Banshees included, that stand a shot at not only tying that record, but I've got there's one film I think that could surpass it. It really depends on how well it goes over with SAG, so we'll see. Anyhow, but we'll go ahead and get started here with some updated predictions, and then I do have a couple reviews I want to do real quick. One of them, I when we get done with the predictions, I have to start with the one I just got out of. The film I just saw today, I left the theater, I was so pumped up, I was like, I have to talk through my process with this, because I am all sorts of worked up about it. We'll get there. Okay, so starting in the category of stunt ensembles, and we'll go ahead and get that out of the way first here. I'm looking at the Batman to get in, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness to get in, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever gets in, and The Woman King, I think, gets in. Again, you look for that one outsider. And then I think the 5th slot is Everything Everywhere All at Once. And having seen that one, it's like, there's a couple like kung fu type sequences and stuff in the film. I'm like, I think that one's going to get in. So, and that, I could be wrong and it just misses and it just goes for the top categories and ensemble, but I think that one can get into stunt too. I really think it does. Otherwise, the other 4 films I have listed here as ones to watch out for, and I don't know, not to say that anything else that could get in is like totally off my radar, but I'd be a little more surprised if any one of these nominees comes from a film that's not one of these 9, including the 5 I just named. The other 4 are Top Gun Maverick, which I'm putting it in just in case, and they might, because I don't think Tom Cruise is getting a nomination here for actor. I don't think it's in for ensemble, and that's, that leaves stunt ensemble as the only other one. And of course, since there's really not that many like actual stunts in the movie, the only way, if they're really lame and they just put it in for stunt ensemble just so it gets something, that's about the only way I see it getting in. If they're just like, we don't know where else to put Top Gun, so we're just going to give it a stunt nomination. That's about the only thing I can see. Another Marvel film out this year was, of course, Thor: Love and Thunder, and that one I think it's not going to get in, but I'll just name it as a possibility. Another one, it's out right now, and it's so CGI heavy, and that's Avatar: The Way of Water, which again, all that's green screen, and all a lot of it is CGI and motion capture. So I don't think it's going to get in, but I'll just name it just in case. And then the last one is Babylon. Just wait. Okay. But yeah, Babylon. Yeah, and that was just like, that could be one just in case as well. We'll see. Okay. So getting into the top 5 categories now. In supporting actress, I think Jessie Buckley's in. I think Carrie Condon's in. Jamie Lee Curtis is in. Angela Bassett's in. And Carey Mulligan is my 5th one. So, yeah, I generally feel like that's... Carey Mulligan's the one wild card slot here where I'm like, they might go for it. She said, I think, screened early enough and stuff. Otherwise, Stephanie Sue, I think, would be a good choice here. I would say possibly Hong Chow for The Whale, if The Whale just happens to go over a little better with actors than it does with, for example, like screenwriters or producers and stuff when it gets to like Best Picture and everything. Even though it's of course it's not just producers that vote on Best Picture at the Oscars, but it's everybody. But yeah, like the director's branch, for example, I don't think is going to go over strongly for The Whale. Editing branch, so on and so forth. It really looks like at this point, screenplay and an acting, at least one acting nomination for Brendan Fraser seems to be the strength of the film. So if the acting branch likes it enough and stuff, yeah, I could see it. I would feel better about it though if Hong Chow had gotten that nomination 5 years ago now for Downsizing, because generally speaking, and that's why I'm like Carey Mulligan, I think is a better shot at the Oscars right now than say Stephanie Sue in some light, Claire Foy, who's also in Women Talking, possibly even Janelle Monáe for Glass Onion. None of them are previous nominees. Carey Mulligan was, and she was actually just nominated here a couple years ago. Angela Bassett's a previous nominee as well. Anyways, but yeah, I think generally speaking, these are the 5 I'm with. By the way, Stephanie Sue, Janelle Monáe, Claire Foy, Hong Chow, I think those are the 4 I'm looking at otherwise here in supporting actress. I think Glass Onion is one I'm going to talk about as well here. So I'll get into her and Janelle Monáe here in a second. Well, not a second, probably 10, 15 minutes. Like I said, give me some time on that first film I'm going to talk about. In supporting actor, I am not going with the double 2 nominations from 2 films here in this category. Ke Huy Quan is out front for me for Everything Everywhere All at Once, and then I have Brendan Gleeson in 2nd for Banshees, Judd Hirsch in 3rd for The Fabelmans. I'm sticking right now with Jeremy Strong for Armageddon Time. It feels like one of those weird nominations that you just got to try to go for, and then Barry Keoghan I think does get in for Banshees as well. So I have Paul Dano missing. I would say Eddie Redmayne got the surprise nomination to the Globes, and he did not carry through at Critics' Choice. So I could see him coming back. The Good Nurse was one. Again, we look at, especially with SAG, you're looking at films that screened earlier in the year or released earlier in the year. Usually better when they're released early in the year. That way they have more access to be seen. And The Good Nurse definitely fits into that. Otherwise, possibly Ben Whishaw for Women Talking, even though that one not doing extremely well at the Globes, I think generally has hurt it. It's starting to fall in the rankings, I think, on most lists for Best Picture as well. Brad Pitt was also a nominee at the Globes for Babylon. We'll see. I'm not... Yeah. We'll get into it. Hold on. I know, you guys probably know what I'm going to get into, but yeah. Okay. Getting into Best Actress, though. Cate Blanchett's out front for me for Tar. Then you have Michelle Yeoh for Everything Everywhere All at Once, Viola Davis for The Woman King, Michelle Williams for The Fabelmans, and Danielle Deadwyler for Till. Boy, I think this one, we're really down to like 3, 4, maybe 5 choices otherwise here. Speaking of Eddie Redmayne, I think if that one goes over and Eddie Redmayne gets in, I would say it's more likely than not that Jessica Chastain also gets in. Even though she didn't make it into the Globes, I just look at that and I'm like, damn, she feels like one that, again, another thing we look at here at SAG sometimes is actors that like to work with other actors, or that, kind of the ones that work with everybody, the ones that have been in a lot of projects. And I feel like Jessica Chastain, it's like, yeah, she's done a lot of stuff on TV, which, again, a lot of the voting block for SAG is television. She won here last year for Eyes of Tammy Faye, so I could see her getting in again. I don't know if that would, just getting into SAG is enough to then get her propelled to like another Oscar nomination or something. But that's one I'm kind of looked at here in just the last couple of days. I'm like, if it goes over, if Eddie Redmayne gets in, I would absolutely not be shocked if Jessica Chastain follows him and also gets a nomination. Ana de Armas for Blonde, I think, is one that could come through. Part of that I'm just saying because in the makeup category I put Blonde in, and sometimes they do like to, cross over with that. The way Judy did a few years ago, and then usually you have your winner sometimes in makeup cross over to an acting win if it's a big transformational role, like Meryl Streep in Iron Lady, or like Gary Oldman in Darkest Hour. And potentially could be again this year with Brendan Fraser and The Whale. And then we have Olivia Colman that we can't discount for Empire of Light, and Margot Robbie for Babylon. In the Best Actor category, I'm going to stick with Brendan Fraser for now for The Whale. Colin Farrell I have in second place for Banshees. Then Austin Butler for Elvis. Bill Nighy for Living. I was going to say Loving, but no, that's a different film. And then, Hugh Jackman I think still gets in for The Son. Even though that one I'm starting to... I have him down in fifth, and he is barely hanging by a thread here. It's because I don't really know who else to go with here. I'm not... Yeah, Tom Cruise did get the Critics' Choice nomination. That's with 6 slots. I know. Even though Hugh Jackman was not one of those 6, I don't know. Jeremy Pope got in for the Globe, but then missed Critics' Choice with 6 spots as well for The Inspection. And I just don't know if that's one of the SAG movies, If they're watching Babylon and they really like Babylon, Diego Calva could go along for the ride and get an individual nomination, but right now I'm not really sensing that. So I'm just kind of looking. I'm like, otherwise I'm really struggling to find who could be that 5th slot, unless it's a complete surprise, somebody like Will Smith for Emancipation, or let's see, who was the other one that caught my eye here when I was looking down the list? Who was it? Did I pass him? Whoever it was. Maybe it was Adam Driver for White Noise, and that one is a Netflix film. It was screened at a couple festivals early and then released in late November, early December. So that could be early enough for the SAG ensemble to go for it, or for the SAG voting block to go for it. But I don't know. I'm just really struggling to find any other choices in that one. So yeah, I'm sticking with those 5. Okay, then for the ensemble category, and this one I feel like I've gone with these 5 previously, and I'm not really sure where to change it. I just feel like these are a pretty solid 5 right now. That's Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Fabelmans, Banshees of Inisherin, Glass Onion, and The Woman King. I just Women Talking, I feel like after the Globes and stuff and the stumble there, even though it did recover in a big way there at Critics' Choice. Man, I don't know. I feel like this is one that on paper sounds like an easy, nomination for SAG to do, but it's one that's, screened at a couple places early, disappeared, released late. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Other times it does. I don't know. And then, versus Glass Onion, which is on Netflix, and it released right before Christmas. So, like myself, I sat down with the family and we watched it over Christmas, on Christmas Day. So I'm like, I just picture all the, because SAG is also, you look at like Weatherman from Indiana, not, I guess it's a David Letterman reference or something, I don't know. But no, it's like, it's the radio personalities across the country. It's like a lot of them can apply for SAG memberships, and they get into the voting block and stuff once in a while. So I just look at that, I'm like, yeah, almost everybody seems to have Netflix nowadays, so that was a really prime time to release it, right, when we're getting close to the end of voting, or, start of final voting, I should say. So I'm like, yeah, Glass Onion, I feel like, is really solid there. And plus, generally speaking, the first film, the first Knives Out, I feel like it, obviously it kind of started getting into the screenplay category and stuff kind of later in the season. It was finally by like the Screen Actors, or sorry, the Writers Guild, and then BAFTA. Then it kind of propelled itself to getting that nomination at the Oscars for screenplay. So now that we kind of know what Knives Out is and stuff, I feel like the SAG is also going to say, look, that was a great ensemble in that first movie. Let's get the sequel in there. That's my feeling. The Woman King is, other than probably Everything Everywhere All at Once, the most diverse cast, or the most non-white cast. So I feel like that one's got a good shot. Banshees, I think, is just generally speaking, like McDonough's last film, really in a good spot right now, where it just feels like, okay, it led nominations at the Globes, still did very well at Critics' Choice. It looks like it's in a really solid spot here for getting 4 slots here for acting categories. Throw in ensemble too. That's your 5th nomination, I think, for that one. And then Everything Everywhere All at Once, I have into 4 categories in this one. That's also 5. But if Stephanie Sue makes it in too, if she and Jamie Lee Curtis both make it in, that's 6. That's a record. Everything Everywhere All at Once has a real shot at doing that too. I think she's close. They don't tie and go for 6 slots here. At least I've never seen that happen. That's never happened at SAG before. I don't think they would do that this time for whatever reason, but no. So it's like, I don't know. I feel like Jamie Lee, for whatever reason, she is solidifying in this race big time. I think the only way she falls out is if she doesn't even make the short list for BAFTA, which, generally speaking, I don't see that happening. The old voting block of BAFTA back in the 80s actually gave her a win for her performance in Trading Places. And they also gave it, I think it was Denholm Elliott also won in supporting actor for that film. So, I mean, obviously that's a long time ago. But no, I feel like that's, if that one example, just given that, it's like, I don't know. I generally feel like she'll make the list at least. Now, if she makes the list, doesn't end up getting one of the 6 slots at BAFTA, I believe it's still 6. Okay, then I feel like, well, then that's, we'll see. But I don't think she's going to miss here at SAG. So she seems to be solidifying here, but otherwise, and then Angela Bassett, I feel like she hasn't missed anywhere yet. Black Panther, of course, we can't forget the first one for stunt ensemble and then one for film ensemble. So they like that one, the first one at least. So I see them kind of giving, in a similar way, the second film 2 nominations, even though it's probably not in for ensemble this year, film ensemble that is. I think stunts it'll still get in for. Let's see. Otherwise, speaking of other films that have a shot at getting in for ensemble, Elvis has done pretty well here, even though Austin Butler seems to be like the one and done here this time. I don't know. Remember Bohemian Rhapsody, which I don't know why. That one's kind of a comp, I guess, in some ways. That one not only got in, but I think came kind of close to winning ensemble that year. It was probably the second choice there. It might have been. Otherwise, I think Babylon, you got a lot of actors in that one, even though this is, again, one that released later in the season, and it's not doing extremely well at the box office, especially for a wide release. I don't know. I think it's we got to name it just in case it happens, but I'm not super confident in that one happening. Triple R, some people have said could break through, but I think if that was going to happen, then it'd have to take the place of Woman King or even possibly Everything Everywhere All at Once. But I really don't see that happening. And then She Said. I think She Said is one. I'll throw it in there again. It seems like it's just not taking off outside of possibly screenplay and then possibly supporting actress, and it could end up just getting nothing at the Oscars for nominations. I can see that happening because it did seem to be kind of swallowed up when it was releasing and stuff. So, yeah. Again, I feel like my 5 are pretty safe. That's Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Fabelmans, Banshees, Glass Onion, and The Woman King. So that means, Woman King would end up with 3 if my number's right there. Glass Onion would just get the 1, but I think they're fine with that. Could possibly get 2 if Janelle Monáe gets in. Banshees would end up with 5. Fabelmans would end up with 3. 3, unless Paul Dano gets in. And it's, then it gets to 4. Then Everything Everywhere All at Once I have in for 5, and I think 6 is a real possibility for sure. Okay, so that's my thoughts on that. So moving on now, I've got a couple, like I said, a couple reviews to do. First one here is I just got out of Babylon. So here's the thing. Just real quick, put this into perspective. Back in the day when I was at the old place, if I wanted to see multiple movies in a day and stuff, it was about a 40-minute drive to like the nearest AMC theater and everything. And that's 40 minutes there and then 40 minutes back. So I had plenty of time to kind of let my thoughts coalesce, think back to the first or second movie or however many I was seeing, and put it all together. Now where I'm at, it's only like a 2-minute drive. So, so maybe that's for the worse. So maybe I'll come off a little harsh. Maybe over some time in the next couple videos, I might come back to this and say, hey, I've kind of thought about it a little bit and I've changed a little bit. But for immediate reaction, for like a how do I feel right now kind of thing, I got to say this. I'm going to start this review with a quote from Siskel and Ebert, how they used to describe some movies, and kind of paraphrase it a little bit. And that is, this movie took 3 hours out of my life that I'm never going to get back. Yeah. So speaking of theft, generally speaking with this movie, I got to say, Damien Chazelle, I feel like he's ripping off Singing in the Rain, Sunset Boulevard, a couple films like that, movies about movie making, and there's just next to no original thoughts when it comes to this movie. There's almost nothing that this movie is saying that hasn't been said a dozen times in other films, done better in those two examples I cited. No, this is a total nightmare, a total disaster of a film for me. Just a complete waste of talent and of all the stuff that this movie could have been. There's just absolutely no original thoughts going into this film. Absolutely none. I can start though with a couple positives. First of all, technically speaking, and in particular, I'm really going to cite Linus Sandgren, the cinematographer here. My goodness, the work he is doing on this film. I wish he had a better script to work off of like he did with First Man and with La La Land and all that. But man, what he does with this film, camera-wise and stuff, a lot of the long takes and everything, he deserves a nomination for this film, absolutely. Tom Cross, who's the editor on this one, has been working with Chazelle as well on all his films so far. He's given a lot of tasks here. It's not easy to cut down a movie to 3 hours, especially with, I'm sure, all the material they had for this film. And it's not easy to do all the quick cuts and some of those quicker sequences, which there's a few of here and there in the film, but and make it kinetic and make it look good and make it feel good, make it feel like it belongs. That's something that's, I think, generally speaking, easier said than done. But the work he does, I don't have him getting in right now for a nomination for editing, but if he got in, I would say, hey, he did a good job, and he had a tough task on that film, and again, I wish he had better material to work with. That would have made it even better, but as is, he did a great job there. Justin Hurwitz, I hope, maybe he has already, but I'm trying to think, I'm like, off the top of my head, I can't remember any other films he's done besides some Damien Chazelle films, but it's like, I hope he keeps working, because I think it's time for him to split up with Chazelle, because it's just, in this film, I think he does a good job. There's like one particular theme that's kind of like a little bit of a romantic, a little bit of a love theme, that I really liked and that I think sticks with me, but the rest of the score was okay. The rest of it was okay. So this one, I think he is going to get in for score again this time, but I don't know if it's one he should win his second Oscar for, or third, or whatever, because didn't he also win for song? I'm pretty sure he was part of the nominees there for song as well, so this would be his third Oscar, I guess. Unless there's another one I'm forgetting about that he did later, but no. I'm trying to think otherwise. Yeah, production design, costume design, all that stuff is great. Really good. Again, wish it served a better story, but oh well. And I gotta say too, the three lead actors, I think they're not given a bunch to do. There's not a lot there on the page, except for maybe one or two little sequences here and there, but. Brad Pitt, for what he's given, I think he does a serviceable job. Margot Robbie, for what she's given, and she's given a lot, and there's a lot of, big sequences with her and stuff. It's a big performance, like we heard about early on. yeah, I generally feel like if she does get in, I'm not going to really have too many complaints because it's a big performance. She's asked to do a lot and she holds it down, and she is up to the challenge, and good for her. I think she's generally entered this realm now where it's like, oh, she's and I think we all knew this with like I, Tonya, and with Bombshell, and with what's the other one I really liked her in? Shoot, it'll probably come to me later, but not Suicide Squad. Not Suicide Squad. What was... I'm gonna look her just really quick because I feel like I should know what it is. The other one that I saw her in that I thought she was really good in. Shoot, what was it? Oh, well, Mary Queen of Scots, I think she did a pretty good job in. She kind of stood out a little bit in that one. I mean, I don't know if I would have necessarily put her in to be a nominee that year for supporting actress, but I'm like, yeah, for what she did, I thought she was the better. She did a really good performance there. Saoirse Ronan also I thought was really great in that film, but yeah, with this one too, I think with Babylon now, it's like, yeah, she does clear herself above the degree of, yeah, she's not just a pretty face and a pretty body and the gal from Wolf of Wall Street anymore. She is Margot Robbie, has cemented that for sure. And then Diego Calva, I think, who's a newcomer to this and stuff. I think he does a good job too. Again, his character is the very basic protagonist of the guy, the person we're seeing all this crazy shenanigans and stuff. We're seeing everything through his eyes, and yeah, there's hardly even any agency to his character. He just keeps stumbling into things and gets promoted upwards, which I guess is kind of a nice play because that's what some people say happens to everybody in Hollywood. You kind of fail upwards. Sometimes that happens. But anyhow, it's kind of I guess a small joke that it's like he just keeps stumbling into positions where it's like, hey, he gets up with somebody that's powerful in the business, and he just keeps advancing and keeps advancing and keeps advancing and stuff. Otherwise, I was gonna say there's one monologue toward it's in the third act from I believe it's Jean Smart. It was Jean Smart or it was somebody else. I'm gonna triple check. But there was one monologue that she had that I thought actually for once I was like, okay, this is like the one spot where I thought Chazelle was actually saying something that, wasn't really... It hasn't really been done in this way yet, It's, it felt like, okay, this is maybe one spot where he's actually saying something of value here, where it's something where it's like, yeah, that's actually something that, that's nice to listen to and actually has some meaning. That one monologue. And then there's also, I got a little excited when we got to the Tobey Maguire sequence, because I could kind of tell from the lighting and stuff. I'm like, wait a minute, this is from the trailer. This is Tobey Maguire. Okay, let's see what it is. And his character is, pretty different from the rest of the film. And that's not say, I guess that's not saying a whole lot, because almost every character in the film has some level of craziness to them, which I'm going to come back to, because it's generally ends up being a very, very negative for me. But no, it's his character was a little interesting, and then what they did with him and where they end up going and stuff, it's like, okay, that was okay, kind of different, But yeah, my main point is, though, I really didn't sympathize with any of the characters. So that makes it, especially in a 3-hour movie, that makes it very hard to enjoy it when you don't really sympathize with anybody. You don't really extremely relate to anybody. Yeah, I think the Brad Pitt character, you do, there is a little, you get a little bit of, appreciation for him, I think. When we get closer to the end of the second act and through the third act, because it's like, okay, you kind of see how how that happens with some stars when they transition from, silent films to talkies and stuff, how just some of them just disappeared and stuff. Again, that's been done for sure. That was the whole story of Sunset Boulevard. So I feel like we're not really in a spot where, we're exploring new territory with that. So that, likable and, relatable and stuff to a fault. The Margot Robbie character is just crazy the whole way through, and there's just really, at the end you're just kind of more watching her than you are rooting for her or rooting against her. There's just I don't know. And yeah, by the end it's like she does enough stuff where you're like, okay, I don't know if there's a lot of, for me personally, I was like, just watching it, I'm like, I don't know if there's a lot of redemption for this character. She just keeps being an idiot when it comes to behaving herself and when it comes to being professional, and it's like, oh, she wants to be a big star, but it's like, it's just annoying by the end of the film when she just keeps making the same mistakes, and you have poor Diego Calva's character, which just gets dragged along through it every time, and it's just, he never tells her to fuck off, or he never gets her to a point where it's like she wants to change stuff. They also, I think, do a very poor job in this film. One really big problem I had when we get into the third act is when we get to kind of the fates of some of these characters. They telegraph what's going to happen with these characters. It is extremely easy to see how the fates of these characters is going to go down. Again, because there's really no movement with these characters. They kind of start in one place, and outside of the Brad Pitt character, who goes through a little bit of a change, they end in virtually the same place. It was kind of neat to see, and actually I've talked about it before. I've worked on writing some scripts and stuff. I actually just wrote a script, just a first draft, so it's not done. But it was kind of a version of a film it's a film that's about like the industry a little bit, and about an entertainer, an actor or whatever and stuff, and I throw in a lot of real movies, real performances that match those movies, and then he gets thrown into like other movies, and he works with other actors and stuff, and it's like, okay, I kind of like in this film a little bit of the idea of, hey, we're gonna throw in like Irving Thalberg, we're gonna throw in a couple other actors here and there that get name dropped and stuff that show up, and you're like, oh, okay, that's kind of neat. Yeah, but that, and mixed in, so you get real and you get fake. It's like fake movies, but some of them are, you get the jazz singer in there, of course, because it's part of the movie is transitioning from silent films to talkies and all that. But yeah, and then I don't know. Otherwise, it's like I just thought, what was the other thought I just had? That was a negative. Oh, that's right. 3 hours. I got like 2 chuckles out of the movie. For a movie that's supposed to be a comedy, it was not funny. I just did not find it funny. There's just, unfortunately, I think some of the jokes in the movie, like Brad Pitt stumbling and being drunk, falling down off the rooftop and stuff, not only is that, toward the beginning of the film, but it's in all the trailers. So by the time it comes up, you're like, oh, okay, here comes this scene. Yep, okay. It's in all the TV spots. It's just, just no good. By the time you get to the film. So I think they spoiled that for sure. Again, by putting it into every last advertisement for it. Also, when it comes to the film's humor, some of it is toilet humor. And just kind of bizarre. In the first 5 minutes, you get an elephant explosive diarrhea joke, and you get a golden shower joke. And I'm like, okay, all right, so I was like, yeah, within the first 5 minutes, I'm like, okay, this is not a great start. Yeah. And I don't know, I can see some people comparing this to like Wolf of Wall Street and stuff, and it's like, okay, well, the comparison, though, the thing that made, for me, Wolf of Wall Street is I don't think it's like the greatest film ever made, but it certainly was a film I really liked, and I still really, really like that film. And it's, it's also about debauchery. It's about, people just behaving badly for 3 hours. So it is, I can see where people can comp it to this film. The thing is, with Wolf of Wall Street, they eased you into it. It's like, okay, you start with, okay, maybe, McConaughey gets, a couple, snorts of cocaine or something at lunch. Okay, then you get to, you gradually build into the debauchery. It leads up to, like, the Quaalude scene and stuff. And it's like, okay, now we're, it prepares you for it. Versus this film, right off the bat, they're hitting you with, like, the most extreme stuff. With that stuff. With basically orgies. With, all the debauchery and stuff. Like, right off the top, it hits you with it. So it leaves it nowhere to go. If that's the type of humor you're going for. You don't, that's not how you do this and make it work. You have to build into that stuff to make it more extreme. Just throw in another example, if you want to go to, since we're talking toilet humor and stuff, Dumb and Dumber. It's like they work their way up to the toilet scene, It's like they don't start the movie with Jeff Daniels on the toilet, It's like you gotta build up to that stuff. We talked about a little bit about when the film first screened, but like the blackface controversy, that's here. How they use it in the film was not how I thought they were going to do it. And I guess, obviously for story purposes, they do it to, to make you feel uncomfortable and stuff. And, to kind of move one character, what's his name? Sidney? Yeah, Sidney character. And, yeah, the actor I recognized, what have I seen him in? Oh, he's in Fences. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a few years ago. He does look a little older in this one, but anyways, yeah. What they did with that was like, oh, okay, that's not what I was expecting, and it ends up being like a more political statement for like how bad Hollywood was back in the day for doing this, which is weird. Because at the same time, the film was also glorifying old Hollywood, including in the silent films. Particularly the first 50 minutes after the first kind of the first half hour of the movie is basically just the opening scene, which is all the debauchery. It's like a big orgy party sequence, elephant, all that fun stuff. The golden shower. It's all in that first half hour, big sequence there. And then they get to a part, and then they go to like a day on a film set in this time and how crazy it was and how everybody was drinking and doing drugs the whole time. You had people, you had the set here, you had people doing music right off stage, and it's like, okay, here's a set, here's a set, here's a set, here's a big set if you're doing a big action movie and stuff, or a Crusades movie or whatever the hell they were doing with Brad Pitt's character. But the way they do it, it's glorifying old Hollywood. They're saying, look at how beautiful this was. It was a mess. It was chaotic. But look how beautiful it was. And it's like, well, you don't think they didn't have blackface back in that time? Of course they did. They obviously did. Look back to Birth of a Nation. Look back to some of those films. They had it. So, again, I don't feel like that's a strong point in the film. It's like, okay, are you saying old Hollywood from the 30s on back is bad, or is it good? Because it just doesn't have a clear thought as far as, like, are we doing this? Obviously, you would think the message is it's good, because you go into the big monologue from Gene Smart, which kind of reflects on an actor's destiny and stuff, and how it's all going to go down and everything. But I don't know. It just doesn't seem to have a lot of for sure stuff going on where it has a clear message. Also, one thing though, I was kind of entertained by this it's also in the trailers and stuff, the snake fight sequence. That was kind of entertaining. It was kind of different enough to that point, and it's like, okay, I was entertained by that. It was only about, it was 8-10 minutes out of the movie where I'm like, okay, that was, solid. I don't know. Otherwise, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I could go on for like another half hour about how certain sequences are just really bad, or just some stuff is just embarrassing to watch, and it's just again, so much of this is just Chazelle just kind of trying to do what he's doing and saying, oh, I'm also tipping my hat, but it's like, oh, at that point, it's like, no. At that point, I'm like, no, I'm just not happy that you're, standing on the shoulders of, older films and saying, oh, look at how original I am. No, not this time, buddy. Because Chazelle, I really, really, really liked Whiplash. That's probably in my top 5 from the last decade. La La Land, I really appreciated. Even First Man, I think, again, people are going to keep coming back to that film over time, and they're going to realize that he made also a really, really, really good piece with that film. This one is not it. And, again, I'm really disappointed because there's certain shots and, again, certain sequences where we have the great camera work. There's one particular shot toward, like, the very end of the second act where we see Brad Pitt kind of sneak into a theater to see one of his films screened, and the shot is just, like, something almost out of like a colorized version of Casablanca. It looks that good. He almost has a Humphrey Bogart look to him with the hat and the coat he's wearing and stuff. And it's a beautiful little shot. And I'm like, it is such a shame that something this good is in a movie that is not that great. Yeah, I don't know. I just at this point, it's like, yeah, I don't know what else to say. I feel like I'm just going to keep repeating myself. So, yeah. As far as a score for this film, I don't know. I'm close to like a 2 out of 10. Like, this is a bad experience that I had at the theater today. I mean, really bad. No, this is just not a film where I'm going to recommend to people and stuff. I'm just like, no, don't bother with it. For myself, I might, again, to kind of relive some of those shots and to see those again and stuff, it's like, okay, I'd have to get, rent it or something and just fast forward through a lot of stuff to get to it. But I don't know. Even then, it might not be worth it. I don't know. Yeah. And again, I thinking back to what I had said earlier this season, where I'm like, oh, it's a film that's about the transition from silent films to talkies and stuff, and how it can do that. It's like the Charles Chaplin. I mean, you could do it, have him as a supporting character and stuff, and that could have been a great storyline. You could have done the first half of the film as a silent film, and then the second half of the film includes sound. You could have, been cheeky like that, and I think you really could have worked something. But as is, no. I'm just really disappointed with this film, and I cannot recommend this. Like, I don't know if I can recommend this to anybody. I mean, it's really, I'm surprised I'm not really as pumped. I was glad I got into the SAG stuff first, because if I had just started with this review, I would have been all pumped up. My voice would have been super escalated. Yeah, it's just, I'm glad I had that time to kind of settle down and do that, because no, this is a disaster. This is a total disaster. Okay. That being said, let's flip to a polar opposite, shall we? How about Glass Onion? I really, really like Glass Onion. I really like it. I don't think it's quite up to the level of Knives Out, but I still think this is one of the best films I've seen all year. Daniel Craig slips right back into the role from the first film, whose his character name will come to me in a second here. Oh, geez. Oh, come on, I know this. I just watched this like a week ago today, and I can't remember some of it, but what is his name? Jeez, come on, where is it at? Benoit Blanc, of course. Judas Priest. I cannot believe it took me that long to get to it, but yeah. He slips right back into it, so I'm glad to see him back, and I think he does as good a job in this one as he did in the first film. The ensemble here, I think, does a pretty good job. You've got Janelle Monáe. There's a spoiler with her character, so I don't want to get too far into it, but the role she's given and how she has to do it, I think she does it very well. There's some actors that I think would handle that a little differently, but the way she did it, I thought she handled it really well. And I'll get to it, because I do have a big criticism with the film when it comes to that. I mean, not big, but the most significant criticism I have for the film involves something with her. But yeah, we'll get to it. Let's see. Otherwise, I don't know. Otherwise, yeah, the rest of the cast was really good. None of them, I don't think, are like standout. So it makes sense that Janelle Monáe gets like the Critics' Choice nomination. Daniel Craig gets the Globe nomination. That makes sense. But I also feel like when we get to the end of the film and how it ends and how it kind of escalates, I don't know if we need, because the first Knives Out in retrospect looks very quaint with how that film ended versus how this film ends. There's a little more going on at the end of this film. It gets a little more high action, high intensity and stuff with how it ends. But which I don't know how it's kind of, I don't know really how to feel about it, because on one hand, I miss the quaintness a little bit, and I wouldn't have minded at all if this just had a more quiet ending and just generally did not have the big stuff that happens at the end of this film. But at the same time, it's like, well, I don't want it to be too much like the first film. It does have its differences. One thing that's really good is, having seen the first film kind of, the last 20 minutes or so is kind of unraveling the whole thing. There is a sequence of like an unraveling, but that happens in the first act. And I thought that was like, okay, that I appreciated. That was different enough, but also was, in tone with the first film. That I really liked. Let's see. Otherwise, it's a more complicated mystery this time. There's a little bit more going on. There's fewer. I generally feel like there's fewer characters in this. I think if it's not fewer characters, it's about the same amount. But it just feels a lot more going on. There's a lot more complications and a lot more things going on. And Benoit Blanc's role in this is a little different than the first film. I think for those of you who have seen it, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't seen it yet, yeah, his role is different in this one. He's not doing the exact same thing. He doesn't have the same exact role in this one as he does in the first film, which I enjoyed as well. Yeah, so I guess I can get to the criticism, and it again revolves around the Janelle Monáe thing. I just feel like there's a trope they use there that I'm personally not a fan of. And it feels like whenever you kind of write yourself into a corner and you get into some melodrama, soap opera stuff, it feels like this is the excuse that's there. This is the way out. And I feel like the story they told, I feel like there was a version they could do it where they didn't have what they did, that trope included. I mean, I'm not Ryan Johnson. I'm not going to write down a mystery myself and say I can do it better. But just saying, from what I watched, I was like, I don't know if I don't love that trope, and they didn't do enough with it to make it feel original or make it feel special this time. Yeah, there's a couple other criticisms, some nitpicks I have that revolve around that. Otherwise, yeah, I feel like, it's a different film from the first one in the way it's structured a little bit too. Because there are, I don't think I need to give away every last thing, but there are some, a couple of flashbacks and stuff in the first film. They do that here too, but this time they're a little different. They go a little more. There's a different reasoning for. It's the same reasoning, I guess, for why they did some flashbacks in the first film, but the spot they happen in and how far we've come up to that point and how the rest of the film is going to pan out after that is different. And again, I like that. I like that in this one. I also it's about a 2-hour, 20-minute movie, which I feel like it was okay at that length. I don't know if it needed to be longer or shorter by any means. I didn't feel like we were missing too much stuff. And again, since some of some of it does get a little complex with some of these characters, not so much for the length. I feel like you could have cut that stuff out to help it. I feel like just to kind of trim it down a little bit as far as the complexity of like what else could be happening, an explanation for why this person could be doing something bad, or why this person could be possibly doing something bad against one of the other characters and stuff. Sometimes it does feel like it goes a little overboard with like, okay, here's another motive, here's another motive, here's another motive, here's another motive. So at the end of the day, it does almost feel like if you were trying to explain it yourself, you'd feel like it would get very complicated and very hard to keep track of. Generally speaking, I feel like with the editing in the film and the writing and stuff, I feel like they do a good enough job where it doesn't just outright confuse the audience. And that they did that very successfully, I think, with the first film as well. But yeah. Also, kind of getting into the ending there, I also feel like I generally feel with these characters, I don't know, without getting too much into it, I feel like the first film ends in a way where it's like, okay, generally speaking, everybody kind of gets what they deserve at the end of that first film. I don't know if everybody gets what they deserve at the end of this one. There's a couple spots and a couple characters who have done some very questionable things, have some very questionable tactics, everything like that. And I feel like there's a way for them to get out of that trouble and still be rich, millionaire assholes. I don't know. Which I feel like the film is kind of, generally speaking, there's a little bit of a message politically here of like, hey, let's just shit down on all these assholes out there and stuff. I don't know. It has that attitude, but it's like, well, if that's going to happen, then you have to go through, it'd be nice to go through with it, but instead there's kind of a thing. But, at the same time, though, I know in today's political world there is kind of the cancel culture is out there. It is real. Don't say it's not real. But yeah, it's like, I don't know. So it also felt like, okay, maybe part of me is a little like, okay, I get it. There is a path to redemption for, I would think, most everybody out there. Hitler probably notwithstanding, just as an example. But yeah, it's like, I don't know. So I guess in some ways the film kind of sets it up where you don't want that to happen, but it might happen. It's like, oh, I don't know. There's some, I don't know. I guess I don't know how to feel about it. The film doesn't, I don't think, clearly come down on it, but I don't know. That's kind of it's a thing that makes you think a little bit, and it can, I can understand how some people can have a very negative reaction to that part of it, but I don't know. And that's not to say, I don't think the film is I don't think it's a super political charge film at all, though. It just kind of throws out a couple things here and there, to just to be cheeky or to, to do that. But, yeah. It's actually kind of funny. I was looking up one of the cast members in this, and I was like, oh, he was in the first film. But he plays a different role. And it just reminded me back to, there's a great moment in that first film. I can spoil it now. It's a movie that's been out for 3 years now. But remember that part in the first Knives Out when it's right before the Benoit goes through his whole unraveling of everything involving the Chris Evans character and all that, his true relationship with Christopher Plummer and everything. There's a great moment in that's very funny, where the Wagner character, who's one of the cops in the film, there's a part where Benoit calls out his name, and for a second, the editing of it and the timing of it is so great, where it's like, you're like, wait a minute, what? You're like, he's a bad guy in this? And then it's like, oh, no, of course not. He was just calling him so he could bring in the Chris Evans character. I don't think there's anything quite as that intelligent and funny in this one. Generally speaking, I feel like the first film did have more laughs. I guess that's an example of what I'm getting at there. It doesn't have as many laughs as the first film, which is also kind of too bad. But again, for the story they told, I was fine with it. I didn't, it's not something where I left, when the movie was over and we turned it off and switched on to, I don't know, NFL or whatever was on that day. It's like, we didn't sit around saying, oh, I wish that was funnier. It wasn't at the top of our minds, for sure. I know, again, right off the top of my mind was like, I don't know if they needed to use that trope that they used, but yeah. All right. Otherwise, yeah, generally speaking, I feel like that's about where I'm at on that one. Score-wise, it's really close to a 10 out of 10 for me, but I am going to go a 9 because that trope is so bothersome for me. But, hey, I got to call it like I see it. So, all right. So I do recommend Glass Onion. Do not recommend Babylon. Babylon is, again, 3 hours of my life that I'm never going to get back. So, yeah, don't do that to yourself, folks. Don't do it. Okay. All right, I feel like that's generally it for me. We will come back probably sometime next week with early in the week to do the final Screen Actors Guild Award nomination predictions. BAFTA shortlist should be coming out pretty soon. I'm going to just really quick, I haven't looked this up in advance, so I don't know when the shortlists are announced, but I would imagine it's got to be fairly soon here. Probably in the next few weeks. Let's see, because I think they did the shortlist last year. It was like, what was it? I think it was 2 or 3 weeks before they did the nominations. The nominations were out like the week before the Oscars, so that puts it about this, not too far off. And I should remind us here, this is the, 96th Academy Awards? No, 97th. Okay. Or is it 96th? Yeah, 96th. Okay. 96th Academy Awards. Nominations are going to be out on January the, is it 23rd? 24th. Okay, 24th. We got the 24th there. Okay. So, yeah, we're coming up on it now. We're into January, guys. It's coming. It's coming. So, prepare yourselves. No, that sounds bad, but hey, I just got out of Babylon, so there's some dirty jokes in that one too.